the Indus Valley script. For over a century, thousands of ancient seals bearing mysterious symbols have defied every attempt at decipherment, resisting even artificial intelligence and a $1 million prize for anyone who can unlock their meaning. The Indus Valley script represents one of archaeology's most enduring enigmas, a writing system from a vanished civilization that remains completely unreadable despite intensive research by the world's leading cryptographers and linguists. The script appears on approximately 4,000 artifacts discovered throughout the Indus Valley region, dating to the height of the Harappan civilization between 2,600 and 1,900 BCE. These inscriptions, carved into small seals made of steatite and terracotta, display a consistent set of symbols arranged in brief sequences that suggest organized communication. The civilization that created them built sophisticated urban centers with advanced drainage systems, standardized weights, and extensive trade networks stretching from Mesopotamia to Central Asia. Yet, the meaning of their writing system has remained completely inaccessible to modern scholarship. Researchers have cataloged between 400 and 600 distinct symbols in the Indus script corpus, each appearing with statistical frequencies that suggest deliberate grammatical structure. Asko Parpola, one of the foremost scholars of ancient Indus civilization, has spent 5 decades attempting to correlate these symbols with Dravidian languages still spoken in South India. Rajesh Rao from the University of Washington applied computational linguistics and machine learning algorithms to analyze the script's underlying patterns, determining that it exhibits statistical properties consistent with natural human language rather than religious symbolism or decorative art. Nisha Yadav and other contemporary researchers have employed sophisticated pattern recognition software to identify recurring sequences and possible grammatical markers that appear throughout the corpus. The fundamental obstacle to decipherment is the complete absence of bilingual texts. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics, which were unlocked through the Rosetta Stone's parallel Greek translation, the Indus script exists in isolation without any known translation into a comprehensible language. The inscriptions are remarkably brief, typically containing only 5 to 6 symbols, providing insufficient context for establishing definitive meanings or grammatical relationships. No long texts, no libraries, no administrative archives have ever been discovered, only these enigmatic short sequences that hint at complex thought but refuse to yield their secrets. What makes the Indus script particularly frustrating for researchers is the tantalizing evidence of systematic organization combined with complete semantic opacity. Machine learning analysis has revealed that the script follows consistent syntactic patterns, with certain symbols appearing preferentially at the beginning or end of sequences, while others occupy internal positions. Statistical distribution suggests the presence of grammatical rules governing symbol arrangement, indicating this was a genuine writing system capable of encoding complex information. Yet, despite this structural clarity, the actual meaning encoded in these patterns remains utterly incomprehensible, as if the civilization deliberately designed their writing to resist future interpretation. The government of Tamil Nadu has offered a bounty of $1 million to anyone who can successfully decipher the Indus script, reflecting both the cultural significance and the apparent impossibility of the task. Multiple theories have been proposed and abandoned over the decades, each promising breakthrough leading ultimately to dead ends and scholarly controversy. Some researchers have suggested the script represents an early Dravidian language. Others have argued for Indo-European connections, and still others have proposed it encoded a language family now completely extinct. The academic debate has grown increasingly contentious as decades of effort have produced no consensus and no verified translations. The systematic resistance of the Indus script to decipherment raises disturbing possibilities about the nature of the civilization that created it. Was their language so fundamentally different from all known linguistic families that modern scholars lack the conceptual framework to even recognize its basic structure? Did the Harappan people deliberately design their writing to be comprehensible only to an educated elite, creating cryptographic complexity that transcended simple phonetic encoding? Or does the script's opacity suggest something more extraordinary, a civilization whose methods of recording information operated according to principles entirely alien to our understanding of written language? The Rongorongo. Wooden tablets covered in mysterious glyphs represent one of the few independent writing systems ever developed in the Pacific, yet no one has successfully translated a single complete sentence despite over a century of intensive research. The Rongorongo script of Easter Island stands as a monument to lost knowledge. 27 surviving artifacts bearing intricate symbols that were once considered sacred by the Rapa Nui people, but now remain completely incomprehensible to modern scholarship. The tablets were created on Rapa Nui, the remote Chilean island known internationally as Easter Island, at some point before European contact in the 18th century. These wooden boards, carved with hundreds of carefully incised glyphs, were regarded as sacred objects by the island's indigenous population and were reportedly read aloud during ceremonial occasions by a specialized class of literate priests. The script employs a unique writing system called reverse baustrophedon, where alternating lines run in opposite directions, requiring the reader to physically rotate the tablet 180 degrees after each line. Only 27 genuine Rongorongo tablets have survived to the present day, and remarkably, not a single one remains on Easter Island itself. The artifacts are scattered across museums and private collections throughout Europe and the Americas, removed from their cultural context during the colonial period, when collectors recognized their exotic value but had no understanding of their content. The glyphs themselves display remarkable artistic sophistication, depicting stylized human figures, birds, fish, plants, and geometric forms, many featuring distinctive protuberances and anatomical details that suggest careful observation of natural phenomena. Researchers have identified between 500 and 600 distinct glyphs within the Rongorongo corpus, though the exact count remains disputed due to variations in carving style and preservation. The symbols appear in organized sequences that suggest grammatical structure, with certain glyphs appearing preferentially in specific positions within lines. One tablet, known as the Mamari tablet, contains astronomical notations that researchers have tentatively identified as a lunar calendar, representing the only partially successful interpretation of any Rongorongo text. This singular breakthrough, however, has not provided sufficient context for understanding the broader corpus. The fundamental obstacle to decipherment is the catastrophic loss of cultural knowledge that occurred during the 19th century. The arrival of European diseases, slave raids by Peruvian traders, and Christian missionary activity systematically destroyed Rapa Nui society and eliminated the class of literate priests who could have served as interpreters. Bishop Tipano Jausin of Tahiti attempted to record information from the few surviving Rapa Nui elders in the 1870s, but his informants provided contradictory and unreliable translations that scholars now believe represented fabrications rather than genuine readings. Dozens of decipherment attempts have been proposed over the past century, each claiming to have unlocked the script's secrets through identification with various language families or symbolic systems. Researchers have suggested connections to ancient Chinese writing, Polynesian pictographs, astronomical records, genealogical registers, and religious incantations. Every proposed solution has ultimately failed to produce consistent, verifiable translations that satisfy the scholarly community. The script's resistance to interpretation has grown so notorious that some researchers have questioned whether Rongorongo represents genuine writing at all, suggesting it might instead be purely decorative art or mnemonic symbols lacking linguistic content. The tragedy of Rongorongo extends beyond mere academic curiosity. The script represents one of humanity's rare independent inventions of writing, developed in complete isolation from any other literate culture. Oral traditions preserved by the Rapa Nui people suggest that literacy was restricted to a powerful elite who controlled access to sacred knowledge encoded in the tablets. The systematic destruction of this knowledge through colonialism, disease, and cultural suppression eliminated an irreplaceable window into Pacific intellectual history and demonstrated how easily entire systems of human thought can be permanently erased. Was Rongorongo a fully functional writing system capable of recording complex narratives and historical information? Or did it represent a more limited symbolic system designed to trigger memorized recitations rather than encode actual language? The 27 surviving tablets guard their secrets with absolute silence, carved wooden witnesses to a vanished civilization whose voice we can see but cannot hear. The Linear A Mystery. Ancient tablets scattered across Minoan palaces contain a script that shares symbols with deciphered Greek writing, yet the underlying language remains completely inaccessible, despite a century of intensive research by the world's leading linguists. Linear A represents one of archaeology's most frustrating paradoxes, a writing system whose symbols can be read, but whose meaning remains utterly incomprehensible, guarding the secrets of Europe's first advanced civilization in absolute silence. The script appears on over 1,500 inscriptions discovered throughout Crete and the Aegean Islands, dating to the height of Minoan civilization between 1700 and 1500 BCE. These texts, incised on clay tablets, ceremonial objects, and religious artifacts, document the administrative and ritual activities of a sophisticated Bronze Age culture that predated classical Greece by over 1,000 years. The Minoans built elaborate palaces with complex architectural layouts, established extensive maritime trade networks, and developed artistic traditions of remarkable sophistication. Yet their language, preserved in Linear A inscriptions, remains completely unknown to modern scholarship. Researchers have identified clear structural relationships between Linear A and its successor script, Linear B, which was successfully deciphered by Michael Ventris in 1952 as an early form of Greek. Many symbols are shared between the two writing systems, and the basic principles of syllabic notation appear similar. Scholars can transliterate Linear A texts into phonetic values based on their Linear B equivalents, producing sequences of syllables that appear to follow organized grammatical patterns. Yet these transliterations produce no recognizable words in any known language family, neither Greek nor any other Indo-European tongue, nor do they match Semitic, Anatolian, or any other documented linguistic tradition. Prominent researchers, including Sylvia Ferrara, John Chadwick, Yves Duhoux, and Louis Godart, have devoted decades to analyzing Linear A inscriptions through comparative linguistic methods, statistical analysis, and structural decomposition. Database projects have cataloged every known inscription, identifying recurring patterns and apparent grammatical markers. Certain symbols appear preferentially at the beginning or end of word sequences, suggesting systematic rules governing their usage. Core signs appear consistently across different archaeological sites, while other symbols show regional variations that may indicate dialectical differences or specialized vocabulary. The organizational structure suggests a fully functional writing system capable of encoding complex information. The fundamental obstacle preventing decipherment is the complete absence of bilingual texts or clear cognates with known languages. Unlike Linear B, which could be approached through comparison with later Greek dialects, Linear A appears to represent a language isolate without living descendants or documented relatives. The inscriptions are relatively brief, typically consisting of administrative lists and inventory records that lack the narrative context necessary for establishing definitive semantic relationships. No long historical texts, no literary compositions, no detailed religious narratives have been discovered that might provide sufficient contextual information for linguistic reconstruction. What makes Linear A particularly tantalizing is the evidence that successful decipherment would unlock extraordinary historical knowledge. The Minoan civilization dominated the eastern Mediterranean during the Bronze Age, establishing trade relationships from Egypt to the Levant and influencing the development of later Greek culture. Their religious practices, social organization, political structures, and technological achievements remain largely mysterious, precisely because their written records cannot be read. The tablets hint at complex accounting systems, religious hierarchies, and administrative procedures that would revolutionize our understanding of Bronze Age civilization if their contents could be accessed. The apparent linguistic isolation of Linear A has led some researchers to propose increasingly speculative theories about Minoan origins. Suggestions have ranged from connections to ancient Anatolian languages to links with pre-Indo-European Mediterranean populations, to theories involving migration from distant regions whose languages left no other trace. Each proposed solution has foundered on the lack of verifiable linguistic correspondences and the inability to produce consistent translations that satisfy scholarly standards. The script has resisted every decipherment methodology developed over the past century, from traditional comparative linguistics to modern computational analysis. The tragedy of Linear A extends beyond academic frustration. The script represents the voice of a civilization that created some of the ancient world's most beautiful art, built architectural wonders, and established the foundation for later Greek culture. Their tablets contain records of daily life, religious devotion, economic activity, and administrative governance that would illuminate a crucial period in human development. Yet this knowledge remains forever locked behind symbols we can see and pronounce but cannot understand, a permanent barrier separating us from direct communication with Europe's first literate culture. Is Linear A written in a language so fundamentally different from all known linguistic families that modern scholarship lacks the conceptual framework for recognition? Does the script encode information through principles that transcend simple phonetic representation? Or does the answer lie waiting in some undiscovered bilingual inscription that will finally provide the key to unlocking 3,000 years of silence? The Proto-Elamite enigma. One of humanity's earliest writing systems, predating most ancient scripts by centuries, covers 1,600 clay tablets with symbols that appear to record complex administrative operations. Yet no scholar has successfully deciphered a single complete text despite a century of intensive research. Proto-Elamite represents the ghost of a vanished bureaucracy, an accounting system from one of the world's first civilizations that recorded information according to principles modern researchers cannot penetrate, leaving us with detailed records whose contents remain completely inaccessible. The script emerged around 3200 BCE in the ancient Iranian plateau, centered on the city of Susa in what is now southwestern Iran. This places Proto-Elamite among the earliest writing systems ever developed, contemporary with the first Sumerian cuneiform texts and predating most other known scripts by centuries. The tablets document the administrative activities of a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization that managed complex economic systems, coordinated agricultural production, and maintained bureaucratic records with systematic precision. The civilization that created Proto-Elamite controlled extensive territories, established trade networks, and developed urban centers requiring sophisticated organizational capabilities. The majority of the 1,600 known Proto-Elamite tablets were discovered at Susa during archaeological excavations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Additional examples have been found at other sites throughout the Iranian plateau, including Tepe Yahya, Sialk, and Malyan, indicating the script's widespread use across a substantial geographical area. The tablets themselves are small clay documents bearing impressions of reed styluses that created wedge-shaped marks resembling Mesopotamian cuneiform, though the actual symbol systems appear fundamentally different. Many tablets include numerical notations alongside symbolic representations, suggesting they served as accounting documents recording quantities of goods, labor assignments, or economic transactions. Researchers have identified approximately 1,600 distinct signs within the Proto-Elamite corpus, though many appear only once or twice, making statistical analysis extremely difficult. The numerical system presents particular challenges, employing multiple counting systems that appear to measure different categories of items using distinct unit structures. Some numbers follow decimal patterns, others use sexagesimal bases, and still others employ systems whose organizing principles remain completely obscure. This numerical ambiguity prevents researchers from even establishing basic quantitative relationships within the texts, leaving the fundamental question of what was being counted permanently unresolved. Modern computational approaches have attempted to disambiguate Proto-Elamite through statistical modeling and pattern recognition algorithms. Researchers have applied machine learning techniques to identify recurring symbol sequences, analyze the distribution patterns of signs across different tablets, and search for structural relationships that might reveal grammatical or semantic organization. These sophisticated analytical methods have confirmed that Proto-Elamite exhibits systematic structure consistent with genuine writing, rather than decorative symbolism, yet they have failed to produce verifiable translations or establish connections with any known language family. The fundamental obstacle preventing decipherment is the complete absence of bilingual texts or clear linguistic connections to later writing systems. Unlike Sumerian cuneiform, which evolved continuously and eventually became comprehensible through its descendants, Proto-Elamite appears to have been abandoned entirely around 2900 BCE, without leaving clear successors. Later, Elamite civilizations developed entirely different writing systems that show no obvious relationship to the earlier script, suggesting a complete cultural discontinuity that eliminated all knowledge of how the original texts should be read. No Rosetta Stone exists for Proto-Elamite, no parallel translations, no surviving linguistic traditions that might provide interpretive keys. What makes Proto-Elamite particularly frustrating is the certainty that these tablets contain valuable historical information about one of humanity's earliest civilizations. The systematic organization, the careful numerical notations, and the widespread use across multiple sites all indicate that these documents recorded important administrative and economic data. The civilization that created them possessed sufficient organizational sophistication to require written record-keeping, yet modern scholars with computational resources and linguistic expertise cannot access the information those ancient bureaucrats considered routine. The silence of Proto-Elamite represents more than an archaeological mystery. It demonstrates how easily entire systems of knowledge can be permanently lost when the cultural continuity preserving their interpretation is broken. The tablets sit in museum collections, perfectly preserved physical documents containing detailed information that remains forever inaccessible, testament to how fragile human knowledge truly is. Does Proto-Elamite encode a language so fundamentally different from all known linguistic families that its structure transcends our analytical frameworks? Or does the key to its decipherment lie waiting in some undiscovered tablet that will finally bridge the gap between ancient Iranian record-keeping and modern understanding? The Phaistos Disc. A single clay disc bearing symbols found nowhere else in the ancient world could revolutionize our understanding of early writing systems. Yet, despite over a century of analysis by the world's leading cryptographers, no one has produced a translation accepted by the scholarly community. The Phaistos Disc represents one of archaeology's most enigmatic artifacts, a unique object whose symbols were impressed into wet clay using movable stamps thousands of years before Gutenberg, recording a message that remains completely inaccessible to modern interpretation. The disc was discovered in 1908 during excavations at the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the southern coast of Crete by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier. The artifact itself is a circular clay tablet, approximately 16 centimeters in diameter, inscribed on both sides with a spiral pattern of symbols running from the outer edge toward the center. Dating to approximately 1700 BCE, the disc emerged from the same Bronze Age civilization that produced Linear A and Linear B scripts, yet its symbols bear no clear relationship to either writing system or to any other known script from the ancient Mediterranean world. The disc contains 241 impressed symbols, organized into 45 distinct groups separated by vertical lines, suggesting word divisions or semantic units. These symbols were created using 45 different stamps pressed into soft clay before firing, making the Phaistos Disc the earliest known example of movable type printing technology. The symbols themselves depict recognizable objects, including human figures, animals, plants, tools, and geometric designs rendered with remarkable artistic sophistication. Each symbol appears multiple times across the disc's surface with consistent orientation and spacing, indicating systematic organization rather than random decoration. Researchers have proposed dozens of competing theories attempting to explain the disc's purpose and decipher its content. Some scholars argue the symbols represent a syllabic writing system, encoding an unknown language, possibly related to the Luwian languages of Anatolia or pre-Indo-European Mediterranean populations. Others suggest the disc contains a religious hymn, a calendar of agricultural festivals, or a list of sacred offerings intended for ceremonial use. Still others have proposed it represents a game board, a geometric theorem expressed in symbolic notation, or even a prayer wheel designed to be rotated during religious rituals. Every proposed decipherment has ultimately failed to gain acceptance within the archaeological community. The fundamental obstacle is the disc's complete uniqueness. No other artifacts bearing similar symbols have ever been discovered, despite extensive excavations throughout Crete and the broader Mediterranean region. Without comparative examples, scholars cannot establish whether repeated symbols represent the same phonetic values, determine grammatical relationships between symbol groups, or even confirm that the disc represents genuine writing, rather than decorative art or symbolic notation. The absence of bilingual texts or clear cognates with known languages leaves interpretation entirely dependent on speculation. What makes the Phaistos Disc particularly frustrating is the certainty that it was created with deliberate purpose by craftsmen who possess sophisticated technology. The use of movable stamps indicates organized production methods and suggests the symbols formed part of a broader writing system that has left no other trace. The careful spiral arrangement and consistent symbol spacing demonstrate systematic principles governing the disc's creation. Yet this obvious intentionality provides no insight into the actual message encoded, if indeed any linguistic message exists at all. The controversy surrounding the disc has grown so contentious that some researchers have questioned its authenticity, suggesting it might represent an ancient forgery or a modern hoax planted at the excavation site. These theories have been conclusively disproven through chemical analysis of the clay and thermoluminescence dating, confirming the disc's Bronze Age origin. Yet the authentication only deepens the mystery. The disc is genuinely ancient, genuinely unique, and genuinely incomprehensible. The tragedy of the Phaistos Disc extends beyond academic frustration. This single artifact potentially represents the key to understanding an entire writing system that vanished without leaving any other physical evidence. The technology of movable type suggests a civilization with advanced administrative capabilities and sophisticated communication needs. Yet all knowledge of this system was apparently lost so completely that not even fragments survived into later periods. The disc sits in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum, a perfectly preserved message from the Bronze Age that we can see, photograph, and analyze with modern technology but cannot read. Does the Phaistos Disc contain profound religious wisdom, mundane administrative records, or something entirely unexpected? The 45 unique stamps suggest a fully developed writing system capable of expressing complex ideas. Yet the complete absence of any other examples implies this system was either extremely restricted in its use or was systematically eliminated from the archaeological record. The disc remains one of archaeology's most perfect mysteries, an unquestionably authentic artifact whose purpose and content may remain forever beyond human understanding. The Cypro Minoan Enigma, a Bronze Age writing system used across Cyprus and parts of Crete, displays three distinct variants that appear to encode important administrative and ceremonial information. Yet, despite sharing similarities with deciphered scripts, no scholar has successfully translated a single complete inscription. The Cypro Minoan script represents one of the Mediterranean's most persistent mysteries, a writing system that operated for 5 centuries, recording the activities of a sophisticated civilization before vanishing completely, leaving behind tantalizing fragments that resist every attempt at interpretation. The script emerged on the island of Cyprus around 1550 BCE and remained in use until approximately 1050 BCE, spanning the entire Late Bronze Age period. These inscriptions appear on clay tablets, cylinder seals, and various ceremonial objects discovered at archaeological sites throughout Cyprus and occasionally on Crete, indicating extensive cultural and economic connections across the eastern Mediterranean. The civilization that employed Cypro Minoan maintained complex administrative systems, engaged in international trade with Egypt and the Levant, and produced sophisticated artistic works demonstrating advanced technological capabilities. Researchers have identified 3 distinct variants of the script, designated as Cypro Minoan 1, 2, and 3, each showing regional variations and potentially representing different dialects or administrative traditions. The signs themselves display clear similarities to Linear A from Minoan Crete, suggesting either direct derivation or shared ancestry from a common Bronze Age writing tradition. Approximately 100 distinct symbols have been cataloged across the three variants, with many signs appearing consistently enough to indicate systematic grammatical structure rather than random symbolic notation. The corpus of Cypro-Minoan inscriptions remains frustratingly limited, with fewer than 300 known examples scattered across museum collections worldwide. Most texts are extremely brief, consisting of only a few signs that provide insufficient context for establishing definitive semantic relationships or grammatical patterns. The longest known inscription, discovered at Nkomi, contains fewer than 200 signs organized in what appears to be systematic arrangement. Yet even this relatively substantial text has defied all decipherment attempts over the past century. Scholars have proposed numerous theories attempting to connect Cypro-Minoan with known language families. Some researchers suggest links to ancient Phoenician languages that would later dominate the Eastern Mediterranean, while others argue for connections to archaic Greek dialects spoken by Mycenaean settlers. Still others propose the script encoded an entirely indigenous Cypriot language with no surviving descendants, possibly related to the Indo-Cypriot language known from later classical period inscriptions. Each proposed linguistic connection has ultimately failed to produce consistent, verifiable translations accepted by the scholarly community. The fundamental obstacle preventing decipherment is the complete absence of bilingual texts that might provide a cryptographic key to the script's meaning. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics or Persian cuneiform, which were unlocked through parallel translations in known languages, Cypro-Minoan exists in complete isolation without any discovered Rosetta Stone equivalent. The brief nature of most inscriptions eliminates the contextual information necessary for establishing word boundaries, identifying grammatical markers, or determining phonetic values for individual signs. Researchers can observe systematic patterns in sign distribution, but cannot bridge the gap between statistical structure and actual semantic content. What makes Cypro-Minoan particularly frustrating is its apparent relationship to both Linear A and the later Cypriot Syllabary, a script that was successfully deciphered in the 19th century as representing archaic Greek. The Cypriot Syllabary shows some structural similarities to Cypro-Minoan and was used on Cyprus beginning around 1100 BCE, just decades after Cypro-Minoan disappeared from the archaeological record. Yet despite this apparent chronological and geographical continuity, scholars cannot establish clear evolutionary connections between the two writing systems. The relationship suggests Cypro-Minoan should be decipherable through comparison with its apparent successor, yet this methodology has produced no breakthrough. The tragedy of Cypro-Minoan extends beyond mere academic frustration. The script represents 5 centuries of Bronze Age Cypriot history, a period that witnessed major civilizational upheavals, including the mysterious Sea Peoples' invasions, the collapse of Mediterranean palace economies, and the transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age technologies. The tablets and inscriptions potentially contain crucial historical information about trade relationships, political structures, religious practices, and the catastrophic events that ended the Bronze Age world. Yet this knowledge remains permanently locked behind symbols whose structural patterns we can analyze, but whose actual messages remain completely inaccessible. The systematic study of Cypro-Minoan continues in academic institutions worldwide, with researchers applying increasingly sophisticated computational linguistics and statistical analysis to the limited corpus. Each new analytical approach reveals additional patterns and structural regularities that confirm the script's systematic nature. Yet none has produced the breakthrough that would finally allow these Bronze Age voices to be heard. Does Cypro-Minoan encode a language so fundamentally different from all documented linguistic traditions that modern scholarship lacks the conceptual framework for comprehension? Or does the key to its decipherment lie waiting in some undiscovered inscription that will finally bridge 3,000 years of silence and reveal what these ancient Cypriots considered important enough to commit to permanent record? The Cascajal block, a serpentine stone block carved with 62 mysterious signs, represents potentially the earliest writing system ever developed in the Americas. Yet, despite intensive analysis by leading Mesoamerican scholars, no one has successfully deciphered its meaning or even confirmed whether it constitutes genuine writing. The Cascajal block stands as one of archaeology's most controversial discoveries, an artifact that could revolutionize our understanding of Olmec civilization and the origins of American literacy, or represent something else entirely, a puzzle that has divided the scholarly community and resisted every decipherment methodology for nearly 2 decades. The block was discovered in 1999 near the village of Cascajal in the Mexican state of Veracruz, the heartland of ancient Olmec civilization. The artifact measures approximately 36 centimeters in length and weighs approximately 12 kilograms, carved from a local serpentine stone into a roughly rectangular shape. The signs themselves were incised into the stone's surface in horizontal rows, displaying remarkable artistic consistency and systematic arrangement that suggests deliberate communication rather than random decoration. Dating analysis places the block's creation around 900 BCE, making it potentially older than any other documented writing system in the Western Hemisphere. The 62 symbols carved into the Cascajal block display distinctive characteristics that set them apart from later Mesoamerican writing systems, including Zapotec, Maya, and Epi-Olmec scripts. Epigraphic analysis conducted by researchers from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History identified recurring patterns in symbol distribution, suggesting grammatical structure and systematic organization. Certain signs appear multiple times across the inscription, while others occur only once, a distribution pattern consistent with natural language where common words appear frequently, while specialized vocabulary remains rare. The symbols themselves depict recognizable motifs, including cornstalks, insects, speech scrolls, and abstract geometric forms rendered with artistic sophistication, characteristic of Olmec craftsmanship. Statistical analysis published in the journal Science in 2006 examined the sequential patterns of the Cascajal symbols using computational linguistics methodologies. Researchers applied entropy calculations and conditional probability analysis to determine whether the symbol sequences exhibited properties consistent with genuine linguistic communication. The results indicated that the Cascajal block displayed statistical characteristics falling between known writing systems and purely random symbol arrangements, suggesting possible linguistic content without providing definitive confirmation. The sequential ordering showed non-random patterns that could indicate grammatical rules governing symbol placement, yet these patterns remain too ambiguous to establish whether the inscription represented phonetic writing, logographic notation, or some other form of symbolic communication. The archaeological context surrounding the Cascajal block's discovery has sparked intense controversy within the scholarly community. Unlike most significant archaeological finds that emerge from systematic excavations with careful documentation of stratigraphic context, the Cascajal block was reportedly discovered by local workers during road construction activities. The artifact lacks the controlled archaeological context that would allow researchers to establish definitive dating through association with other datable materials. Critics have questioned whether the block's reported discovery location accurately reflects its true archaeological provenance, raising concerns about potential forgery or misattribution that have plagued the artifact since its initial publication. Attempts to decipher the Cascajal inscription have produced no consensus among Mesoamerican epigraphers. Some researchers argue the symbols represent an early stage of writing development, possibly recording administrative information, ritual formulas, or historical narratives important to Olmec society. Others suggest the inscription might represent a non-linguistic notation system designed to record numerical data, astronomical observations, or calendar information without encoding actual spoken language. Still others maintain that insufficient evidence exists to classify the Cascajal block as genuine writing, proposing it might represent decorative art, symbolic imagery with religious significance, or even a modern forgery designed to deceive archaeologists. The fundamental obstacle preventing definitive interpretation is the Cascajal block's complete uniqueness. No other artifacts bearing similar symbols have been discovered despite decades of archaeological investigation throughout Olmec territories. Without comparative examples, researchers cannot establish whether repeated symbols represent consistent semantic values, determine reading direction with certainty, or identify grammatical relationships between different signs. The inscription exists in absolute isolation, a potential window into Olmec intellectual life that remains permanently closed without the contextual information necessary for interpretation. The tragedy of the Cascajal block extends beyond academic controversy. If genuine, the artifact represents revolutionary evidence that the Olmec civilization, recognized as Mesoamerica's mother culture, developed sophisticated writing capabilities centuries earlier than previously documented. This would fundamentally transform our understanding of intellectual development in the ancient Americas and establish the Olmec as not merely sculptors and architects, but as literate record keepers whose written legacy has been almost entirely lost. Yet without definitive proof of authenticity or successful decipherment, the block remains suspended between breakthrough discovery and archaeological enigma. Does the Cascajal block preserve the earliest American writing, recording information that could illuminate Olmec society, religion, and history? Or does it represent something else entirely, decorative art, symbolic notation, or an elaborate deception? The 62 enigmatic symbols guard their secrets with absolute silence, leaving us to wonder whether we are looking at the key to understanding America's first great civilization, or at shadows whose meaning was never meant to be recovered. The Byblos Syllabary. Ancient bronze tablets discovered in one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities contain syllabic symbols that appear to represent a fully functional writing system. Yet, despite a century of analysis by the world's leading Semitic linguists, no scholar has produced a verified translation of even a single complete inscription. The Byblos Syllabary represents one of the Mediterranean's most enigmatic scripts, a writing system that emerged in the cosmopolitan port city that gave its name to the Bible itself, recording information in a language that has resisted every decipherment methodology applied to it since its discovery nearly a century ago. The tablets were discovered during archaeological excavations conducted at ancient Byblos in the 1920s by French archaeologist Maurice Dunant. The site itself holds extraordinary historical significance as one of humanity's oldest continuously inhabited cities, a major Phoenician port that maintained trade connections with Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the broader Mediterranean world for millennia. The city's name became synonymous with papyrus in ancient Greek, eventually giving rise to the word Bible through its association with sacred texts written on this imported Egyptian material. The discovery of an unknown writing system at such a culturally important location generated immediate scholarly excitement and speculation about potential connections to other ancient scripts. Approximately 10 tablets bearing the mysterious syllabary have been identified in museum collections and archaeological contexts, though the exact count remains disputed due to questions about the authenticity of certain specimens. The inscriptions appear on stone tablets, metal objects, and architectural fragments dating to the 2nd millennium BCE, placing them contemporaneous with other Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean scripts, including Egyptian hieroglyphics, Mesopotamian cuneiform, and various Aegean writing systems. The symbols themselves display remarkable consistency in execution, suggesting they formed part of an organized writing system rather than random decorative elements or experimental notation. Epigraphic analysis has identified between 80 and 100 distinct signs within the Byblos syllabary, a quantity consistent with syllabic writing systems, where each symbol represents a consonant-vowel combination rather than individual phonemes or complete words. This structural characteristic suggests the script should theoretically be decipherable through comparison with known Semitic languages that dominated the Levantine coast during the Bronze Age, including early Phoenician, Canaanite, and related dialects. Researchers have attempted to establish phonetic values for individual signs through comparison with Egyptian hieratic script and Mesopotamian cuneiform, both of which were used contemporaneously in Byblos for international correspondence and trade documentation. Multiple decipherment attempts have proposed linguistic connections to various Semitic language families. Some scholars argue the Syllabary represents an early stage of Phoenician language development, pointing to Byblos's later role as a major Phoenician city-state and commercial center. Others suggest connections to Canaanite dialects spoken throughout the Levant, or propose the script encoded a language unique to Byblos itself that left no other documentary evidence. Several researchers have claimed successful decipherment through identification of specific signs with Phoenician consonants or Egyptian hieratic symbols, yet none of these proposed solutions has produced consistent translations accepted by the broader scholarly community. The fundamental obstacle preventing verification is the extreme brevity of the surviving inscriptions, combined with the absence of any bilingual texts. Unlike the Phoenician alphabet, which was deciphered through comparison with Greek transcriptions and extensive corpus analysis, the Byblos syllabary exists in near complete isolation, with insufficient textual material for establishing definitive phonetic values or grammatical relationships. The tablets appear to contain dedicatory inscriptions, ownership marks, or brief administrative notations that lack the contextual information necessary for linguistic reconstruction. Without parallel texts in known languages or substantially longer inscriptions that might reveal internal grammatical patterns, researchers remain unable to bridge the gap between structural analysis and actual semantic content. What makes the Byblos syllabary particularly frustrating is its apparent relationship to multiple contemporary writing traditions. Some symbols show clear similarities to simplified Egyptian hieratic characters, suggesting cultural influence from Byblos's extensive trade connections with Egypt. Other signs resemble Mesopotamian cuneiform forms, reflecting the city's position as a crossroads of ancient Near Eastern commerce and diplomatic exchange. Still others appear unique to the syllabary itself, potentially representing indigenous innovations adapted to express sounds or concepts specific to the local language. This mixture of borrowed and original elements creates analytical complexity that has prevented researchers from establishing whether the script represents adaptation of existing writing systems or genuine independent invention. The tragedy of the Byblos syllabary extends beyond academic frustration to represent lost knowledge about one of antiquity's most important commercial centers. Byblos served as the primary port through which Lebanese cedar was exported to Egypt for temple construction and shipbuilding, maintained extensive trade networks throughout the Mediterranean, and functioned as a cultural intermediary between Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Aegean civilizations. The syllabary potentially recorded crucial information about trade relationships, religious practices, political structures, and the daily operations of a Bronze Age international port. Yet, this knowledge remains permanently inaccessible, locked behind symbols whose structural organization we can observe, but whose actual messages we cannot comprehend. The systematic study of the Byblos syllabary continues in specialized academic circles, with researchers periodically proposing new decipherment theories based on fresh analytical approaches or newly discovered comparative materials. Each proposed solution generates brief scholarly attention before foundering on the same obstacles that have prevented breakthrough for the past century: insufficient textual material, absence of bilingual evidence, and the script's apparent incorporation of elements from multiple writing traditions that resist coherent systematic analysis. Does the Byblos syllabary preserve records of Bronze Age commerce, religious dedication, or administrative documentation that could illuminate the operations of one of antiquity's most important port cities? The 10 enigmatic tablets guard their secrets with absolute silence, testament to how easily entire systems of written communication can be permanently lost when the cultural continuity preserving their interpretation is severed by historical catastrophe or gradual abandonment. The Isthmian script. Monumental stone carvings from ancient Mesoamerica contain approximately 500 glyphs that may record crucial historical events and royal genealogies. Yet, despite their apparent sophistication and systematic organization, no scholar has produced a verified translation accepted by the archaeological community. The Isthmian script, also known as Epi-Olmec writing, represents one of the Western Hemisphere's most enigmatic writing systems, a complex symbolic notation that emerged in southern Mexico between the 3rd and 7th centuries CE, recording information that could fundamentally transform our understanding of pre-Columbian civilization if its meaning could be accessed. The most significant example of Isthmian script appears on the La Mojara Stele, a massive stone monument discovered in 1986 near the Acula River in Veracruz, Mexico. The stele stands over 2 meters tall and weighs several tons, carved with elaborate imagery depicting a richly dressed figure surrounded by intricate glyphs arranged in vertical columns, following conventions established by earlier Olmec artistic traditions. The monument bears what appears to be long count calendar dates corresponding to the years 156 and 162 CE, providing precise chronological anchors that should theoretically facilitate interpretation of the accompanying text. Additional examples of the script have been discovered on smaller monuments and artifacts throughout southern Veracruz and neighboring Tabasco, indicating the writing system enjoyed widespread use across a substantial geographical region. Epigraphic analysis has identified the structural characteristics suggesting Isthmian script represents a fully developed writing system combining logographic and syllabic elements. The glyphs display systematic organization with recurring patterns indicating grammatical structure and semantic relationships between different symbolic units. Certain signs appear with sufficient frequency to suggest they represent common grammatical particles or frequently used words, while others occur rarely, consistent with specialized vocabulary or proper names. The script employs approximately 100 distinct core symbols, though variant forms and combination signs increase the total inventory to 110 several hundred recognizable elements. Leading Mesoamerican epigraphers, including Terence Kaufman and John Justison, claimed in 1993 to have achieved breakthrough decipherment of the Isthmian script through systematic comparison with reconstructed Proto-Mixozoquean languages. Their proposed translation of the La Mojara inscription described the political achievements and ritual activities of a ruler named Harvester Mountain Lord, detailing military victories, ceremonial bloodletting rituals, and astronomical observations tied to the long count calendar dates. The decipherment methodology involved assigning phonetic values based on presumed linguistic connections and interpreting glyphs through comparison with later Maya hieroglyphic writing conventions. However, the proposed decipherment immediately faced intense scholarly criticism and has never achieved widespread acceptance within the Mesoamerican archaeological community. Critics argued that the phonetic values assigned to individual glyphs remained arbitrary and unsupported by independent verification, that the proposed linguistic connections to Mixozoquean languages lacked convincing evidence, and that many interpretive decisions appeared driven by desired narrative outcomes rather than objective analysis. The absence of bilingual texts or clear cognates with better understood Mesoamerican scripts prevented independent confirmation of the proposed phonetic values and grammatical interpretations. The fundamental obstacle preventing verified decipherment is the extremely limited corpus of Isthmian script inscriptions available for analysis. Unlike Maya hieroglyphic writing, which survives in thousands of inscriptions providing extensive comparative material for pattern recognition and linguistic reconstruction, Isthmian script exists in fewer than 10 known examples scattered across widely separated archaeological contexts. This scarcity eliminates the statistical validation possible with larger textual corpora and prevents researchers from confirming whether proposed decipherments produce consistent results across multiple independent inscriptions. The brief nature of most texts further compounds interpretation difficulties by providing insufficient context for establishing semantic relationships or verifying grammatical hypotheses. What makes the Isthmian script particularly significant is its potential to illuminate a crucial but poorly understood period in Mesoamerican history. The script emerged during the centuries following the decline of Olmec civilization and preceding the florescence of classic Maya culture, a transitional era about which relatively little historical information survives. The monuments bearing Isthmian inscriptions suggest the existence of sophisticated polities with complex political hierarchies, astronomical knowledge, and historical consciousness sufficient to warrant permanent commemorative records. Yet, without verified decipherment, this entire historical period remains shrouded in interpretive uncertainty. The controversy surrounding Isthmian script decipherment reflects broader methodological challenges inherent in attempting to decode ancient writing systems with limited textual evidence and uncertain linguistic affiliations. The proposed translations remain scientifically unverifiable without independent confirmation through bilingual texts, substantial corpus expansion, or identification of clear linguistic descendants. The monuments stand in museum collections bearing what appear to be important historical records that may forever resist human understanding, testament to how fragile the transmission of knowledge across millennia truly is. Does the Isthmian script preserve crucial historical narratives about Mesoamerican political development, astronomical observations, and royal dynasties that ruled during a pivotal transitional period? The 500 enigmatic glyphs carved into stone monuments continue to challenge modern scholarship, offering tantalizing glimpses of lost knowledge that may never be recovered with scientific certainty. The Vinca symbols. Thousands of inscribed artifacts from Neolithic Europe display systematic symbols that could represent the world's oldest writing system, predating Sumerian cuneiform by millennia. Yet the archaeological community remains bitterly divided over whether these marks constitute genuine writing or merely decorative art. The Vinca symbols stand at the center of one of archaeology's most contentious debates, a collection of signs that could revolutionize our understanding of human intellectual development, or represent nothing more than prehistoric ornamentation. A controversy that has fractured scholarly consensus and raised fundamental questions about the very definition of writing itself. The symbols appear on thousands of artifacts discovered throughout the Danube River basin, primarily in modern Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, dating to the 6th through 4th millennia BCE. The Vinca culture, named after the archaeological site of Vinca Belo Brdo near Belgrade, represents one of Europe's most sophisticated Neolithic civilizations, establishing permanent settlements with advanced metallurgy, complex social organization, and distinctive artistic traditions. The symbols themselves were inscribed on pottery vessels, figurines, spindle whorls, and various ceremonial objects, using systematic patterns that some researchers interpret as proto-writing, while others dismiss as purely symbolic decoration. Researchers have cataloged over 200 distinct signs within the Vinca corpus, ranging from simple geometric forms, including lines, crosses, and circles, to more complex configurations resembling stylized human figures, animals, and abstract patterns. Statistical analysis conducted by archaeologist Maria Gimbutas and subsequent scholars identified recurring sequences and systematic distribution patterns suggesting organized symbolic communication. Certain signs appear with consistent frequency across widely separated geographical locations, indicating shared symbolic conventions throughout Vinca cultural territories. The symbols display deliberate arrangement and careful execution that distinguishes them from random scratches or casual decoration. Proponents of the writing hypothesis argue that the Vinca symbols represent a genuine proto-literacy system developed by sophisticated Neolithic communities for recording ritual information, ownership marks, or administrative data. The systematic nature of the symbols, their consistent reproduction across multiple sites, and their appearance in organized sequences all suggest intentional communication rather than mere decoration. If authenticated as genuine writing, the Vinca symbols would predate Sumerian cuneiform by approximately 2,000 years, fundamentally transforming our understanding of when and where writing first emerged. This would establish European Neolithic communities as equal participants in the development of human literacy alongside the traditionally recognized Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations. However, the writing hypothesis faces fierce opposition from mainstream archaeologists who argue that insufficient evidence exists to classify Vinca symbols as genuine writing. Critics point to the absence of long, complex inscriptions that would indicate narrative capability. the lack of clear bilingual texts enabling verification, and the failure to demonstrate consistent grammatical structure across different artifacts. Many scholars suggest the symbols served religious or magical functions, representing fertility symbols, clan totems, or ritual markers without encoding actual language. The debate has grown increasingly contentious, with accusations of methodological inadequacy and interpretive overreach dividing the archaeological community into opposing camps that question each other's fundamental competence. The fundamental obstacle preventing resolution is the complete absence of contextual information necessary for establishing whether Vinca symbols functioned as genuine writing. Unlike Sumerian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphics, which evolved continuously and left extensive documentary evidence of their linguistic functions, Vinca symbols appear to have been abandoned completely around 4500 BCE, without leaving clear descendants or evolutionary traces. No Rosetta Stone equivalent exists. No extensive narrative texts have been discovered, and no unambiguous administrative archives demonstrate that these symbols encoded actual spoken language rather than purely visual communication. What makes the Vinca controversy particularly significant is its implications for understanding the geographic and temporal origins of human literacy. Traditional narratives position writing as an invention of Near Eastern urban civilizations, responding to administrative needs of complex state societies. The Vinca hypothesis challenges this framework by suggesting that European agricultural communities developed symbolic notation systems millennia earlier, potentially for religious rather than bureaucratic purposes. This would require fundamental revision of established theories about the relationship between social complexity, urbanization, and the development of writing systems. The systematic suppression of alternative theories about Vinca symbols reflects broader institutional resistance to interpretations that challenge established academic narratives. Researchers proposing the writing hypothesis have faced marginalization within mainstream archaeology, denial of research funding, and systematic exclusion from prestigious publications. The academic establishment has systematically dismissed evidence suggesting European Neolithic literacy, protecting conventional chronologies that privilege Near Eastern civilizations as the sole originators of human writing. Publications supporting the writing hypothesis are relegated to fringe journals, while mainstream archaeological discourse treats Vinca symbols as definitively non-linguistic, despite ongoing interpretive uncertainty. The tragedy of the Vinca symbols extends beyond academic politics to represent potentially lost knowledge about Europe's earliest complex societies. If these marks constitute genuine proto-writing, they preserve information about Neolithic religious beliefs, social organization, and intellectual achievements that would illuminate a crucial period in human development. Yet, institutional dogma prevents serious investigation of this possibility, ensuring that whatever messages the Vinca people intended to preserve remain permanently inaccessible to modern understanding. Do the Vinca symbols represent humanity's oldest writing system, evidence of prehistoric European literacy that predates Mesopotamian achievements by 2 millennia? Or do they constitute nothing more than decorative patterns imbued with religious symbolism but lacking true linguistic content? The thousands of inscribed artifacts scattered across Balkan museums guard their secrets with absolute silence, suspended between revolutionary discovery and archaeological self-deception, waiting for resolution that may never arrive as long as academic orthodoxy refuses to seriously consider alternatives to established chronologies of human intellectual development. These 10 unbreakable codes represent more than archaeological mysteries or linguistic puzzles waiting to be solved. They are evidence of a systematic pattern of lost knowledge, civilizations whose voices have been permanently silenced, and intellectual achievements that have been erased from human memory through catastrophic cultural discontinuity and deliberate academic suppression. From the Indus Valley seals to the Vinca symbols, each undeciphered script documents sophisticated societies capable of abstract thought, systematic record-keeping, and complex symbolic communication. These were not primitive cultures experimenting with crude notation systems. They were advanced civilizations that developed writing independently, maintained literate bureaucracies, and recorded information they considered important enough to preserve permanently. Yet modern scholarship, despite computational linguistics, artificial intelligence analysis, and million-dollar bounties, remains completely unable to access the knowledge these ancient peoples committed to permanent record. What unites these lost scripts is not scientific impossibility, but historical tragedy. The Rongorongo tablets were scattered across museum collections, while the priests who could read them died of European diseases and slavery. Linear A remains incomprehensible because the Minoan language vanished without descendants. Proto-Elamite disappeared during Bronze Age upheavals that destroyed entire civilizations. The systematic destruction of cultural continuity through conquest, colonization, and catastrophic collapse has eliminated the interpretive keys that would unlock these ancient voices. Perhaps most disturbing is what these unbreakable codes reveal about the fragility of human knowledge. Writing systems that function perfectly for centuries, recording economic transactions, religious devotion, historical narratives, and administrative documentation, became permanently incomprehensible within generations of their abandonment. The information encoded in thousands of artifacts sits in museum collections, physically preserved but semantically inaccessible, testament to how easily entire intellectual traditions can be permanently lost when the cultural frameworks preserving their interpretation are severed. These ancient codes prove that human history is not a story of continuous progress and accumulated knowledge, but a series of catastrophic discontinuities where entire civilizations and their intellectual achievements vanish completely. The voices of the Harappans, Minoans, Olmecs, and countless other sophisticated cultures remain frozen in symbols we can see but cannot hear, speaking messages across millennia that we lack the capacity to comprehend. The greatest tragedy is not that these codes exist, but that the knowledge they preserve may remain forever beyond human understanding, locked behind barriers that even modern technology cannot penetrate.